name is Caroline, and for 12 years I thought I had a good marriage. Not perfect, nothing ever is, but solid. David and I met in our late 20s, built a life together, had 2 beautiful children, and created what I believed was a foundation of trust and respect. I was wrong. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The late nights at the office that became more frequent, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the subtle distance that had crept into our conversations, the way his phone would always be face down, or how he'd step out of the room to take certain calls. But I trusted him. I believed him when he said the project was just demanding, that his boss was putting pressure on everyone, that he was tired from the long hours. I made excuses for him in my mind, justifying each red flag as it appeared. Then, about 6 months ago, I found the first concrete evidence. I wasn't snooping, not initially. His phone buzzed repeatedly while he was in the shower, and thinking it might be important, I glanced at the screen. 3 messages from Jessica W. that appeared on his lock screen. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? My hand shook as I set the phone back down exactly as I had found it. My mind raced, hunting for innocent explanations but finding none. Jessica was his coworker. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, young, ambitious, beautiful Jessica, who had looked at me with thinly veiled pity when David introduced us. I didn't confront him immediately. Some primal instinct for self-preservation held me back, warned me to gather more information before showing my hand, so I began to pay attention in a way I hadn't before. I checked credit card statements and found dinners at restaurants we had never visited together, a hotel charge in our own city on a night he claimed to be working late, purchases from a jewelry store that had never made their way to me. I noted the nights he came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume, the weekends he was catching up on work but his location showed him across town, the calls that would abruptly end when I entered the room. The evidence mounted, each discovery a fresh wound until I was certain beyond any doubt David was having an affair with Jessica. Still, I said nothing. I needed time to think, to plan. We had children, a mortgage, intertwined lives. Confronting him without a strategy would only lead to denial, gaslighting, and ultimately, him controlling the narrative. Instead, I consulted a lawyer. Discreetly, I documented the evidence I had found. I made copies of financial records, noting assets that might mysteriously disappear in a divorce. I opened my own bank account, I researched rental properties in good school districts, I prepared meticulously and methodically for the collapse of my marriage. Throughout this process, I maintained an outward calm that sometimes surprised even me. I packed David's lunches, attended our children's school events beside him, and made polite conversation over dinner, all while mentally cataloging our household belongings and calculating child support payments. I had nearly completed my preparations when the call came. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The kids were at school and I was working from home, reviewing documents for a case at the paralegal firm where I'd been employed since before our children were born. My personal cell phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello, is this Caroline?" a woman's voice asked, young, confident, with an undercurrent of something I couldn't immediately identify. "Yes, this is she. How can I help you?" "This is Jessica. Jessica Wilson." She paused, perhaps expecting a reaction. When I gave none, she continued, "I work with David." "Yes, I remember meeting you at the company party," I replied, my voice perfectly even as my heart began to race. "What can I do for you, Jessica?" I thought it was time we had a chat, woman to woman, the undercurrent in her voice crystallized, smugness, about David, about what's been happening. I sat very still, my mind suddenly clear and focused. "I'm listening." She laughed softly, a sound designed to wound. "Look, I know this is awkward, but I think you deserve to know that David and I have something special. He's planning to leave, Caroline. He just doesn't know how to tell you." "Is that so?" I kept my tone neutral, giving nothing away. "He says you've grown apart, that you're so focused on the kids and your little job that you don't really see him anymore. He feels invisible with you." Each word was carefully chosen to cut deep, to provoke an emotional reaction. Tears, anger, pleading. She wanted drama, wanted to feel powerful at my expense. "It's not your fault," she continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "These things happen, but he's not happy and he deserves to be happy. We both do." And why are you calling to tell me this, Jessica? I asked quietly. Shouldn't David be the one having this conversation? She sighed dramatically. He's too nice, too worried about hurting you, but I think dragging it out is crueler in the long run. Don't you? Better to rip off the Band-Aid. How considerate of you. She missed the irony in my tone, plowing ahead with her rehearsed speech. He's bought a condo, did you know that? In the city, not far from the office. We've been furnishing it together. He signed the papers last month. Another deliberate pause. He has a key made for me already. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Aren't you going to say anything? She finally asked, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. What would you like me to say, Jessica? I don't know, something. Aren't you upset? Why did you really call me? I asked instead of answering her question. It wasn't out of consideration or to rip off the Band-Aid. What did you hope to achieve with this conversation? She stuttered slightly, thrown off script. I told you, I just thought. You thought I'd cry, scream, beg? You called to gloat, Jessica, to feel powerful, to convince yourself that taking another woman's husband somehow makes you special rather than just another cliché. That's not. It is, I interrupted, my voice still calm but firm, and that's fine, you've said your piece. Is there anything else? Her composure cracked slightly. Don't you even care? Don't you love him at all? Thank you for calling, Jessica. I have all the information I need now. I ended the call and sat motionless for several long minutes, absorbing what I had just learned and making mental adjustments to my plan. The condo was new information, a hidden asset my lawyer would be very interested to know about. I checked the time, 2:15 p.m. The children would be home at 3:30 and David usually returned from work around 6. That gave me just enough time. First, I forwarded Jessica's number and the call details to my email for documentation. Then I called my lawyer. Eileen, it's Caroline. There's been a development. David's purchased property I wasn't aware of, a condo in the city. Yes, I have a way to confirm that. Also, his associate just called to inform me he's planning to leave. No, I don't think I need to wait any longer. Can we execute the plan we discussed? Perfect. I'll come by at 4:30 to sign everything. Next, I called my sister Mary, who had been my rock throughout this ordeal. It's happening today, I told her. Can you take the kids after school? Yes, everything's prepared. I'll bring them to your place with their bags. Finally, I made one last call, to David's mother, Judith. Despite my situation, I had always respected her and knew she would want to hear this from me, rather than through the inevitable gossip that would follow. Judith, it's Caroline. I'm sorry to call with bad news, but I wanted you to hear this from me directly. David has been having an affair, and I'll be filing for divorce today. I know this is shocking, and I'm sorry to put you in this position. There was a long pause before she spoke, her voice heavy with emotion. Oh, Caroline, I'm so sorry. Are you sure? Yes, unfortunately. Uncertain. His girlfriend actually called me today to inform me that he's purchased a condo and is planning to leave me. His what did what? The shock in her voice was genuine. I know it's a lot to process. I just wanted you to know that while David and I won't be married anymore, you'll always be the children's grandmother. I don't intend to create obstacles there. I appreciate that, Caroline, she said quietly. I don't know what to say except I raised him better than this. Have you told the children? Not yet. I wanted to get the legal proceedings started first, so I have clear answers when they ask questions. That's wise. Will you be all right financially? Do you need anything? We'll manage, but thank you. I've been preparing for this possibility for some time. After we hung up, I moved with calm efficiency. I retrieved the pre-packed bags I had hidden in the back of my closet, one for me, one for each child, containing essential clothes, toiletries, and cherished items. I transferred them to my car along with a file box of important documents, birth certificates, passport copies, insurance policies, and financial records. When the children came home, I greeted them normally, helped with homework, and then explained they would be staying with Aunt Mary for a few days while I sorted out some adult issues with their father. At 10 and 8, they were old enough to sense something was wrong, but young enough to accept the sleepover with their cousins as an adventure rather than a crisis. After dropping them at Mary's, I met with my lawyer, signed the divorce papers, and returned home just before 6 p.m., the documents safely filed and initial motions for temporary custody and support already submitted to the court. I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table when David walked in, his face betraying nothing of his supposed plans to leave. "Hey," he said casually, setting down his briefcase. "How was your day?" "Interesting," I replied. "I had a phone call from Jessica Wilson this afternoon." His face drained of color so quickly I almost thought he might faint. "What? Why would she call you?" "To inform me about your affair, the condo you purchased last month, and your plans to leave me?" I maintained eye contact, not allowing him to look away from the consequences of his actions. She seemed quite confident in her position. "Caroline, I can't explain." I held up a hand. "There's nothing to explain, David. Nothing I'm interested in hearing anyway. The children are staying with Mary for a few days. I've filed for divorce, requesting primary custody, child support, and an equitable division of assets, including the condo you failed to disclose." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing without producing sound, clearly struggling to process how quickly his world was imploding. "You've been served, by the way," I continued, nodding toward the envelope on the counter. "My lawyer had it delivered to your office this afternoon, but I asked for a courtesy copy to give you in case you hadn't returned to your desk." "You've already filed?" His voice was strangled. "Just like that? Without even talking to me?" "Just like that," I confirmed, although to be fair, Jessica did most of the talking. "This is insane," he said, running his hands through his hair. "You can't just decide to end our marriage based on one phone call." "The phone call was simply the final confirmation of what I've known for months, David. The hotel charges on our credit card, the jewelry purchases that never made it home, the weekends you were working but your location showed you across town." I kept my voice even, factual. "I've been gathering evidence since January." His face crumpled as he realized the extent of his exposure. "Caroline, please. We can work through this. It was a mistake. Jessica doesn't mean anything to me." "Interesting. She seems to think otherwise. In fact, she was quite detailed about your future plans together." "She's lying. It was just a fling, I swear. I never meant to get caught," I finished for him. "You never meant to get caught. But intentions don't really matter now, do they? Actions do. And your actions have consequences." He changed tactics, desperation creeping into his voice. "Think of the children, Caroline. They need both of us, a stable home. You can't do this to them." "I am thinking of the children," I replied, a hint of steel entering my voice for the first time. "I'm thinking they deserve parents who model honesty, respect, and integrity. I'm thinking they shouldn't grow up watching their father lie to their mother or their mother accept being treated as disposable." "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "I believe you have a condo," I replied, "fully furnished if Jessica is to be believed. I'm sure you'll be very comfortable there." He stood silently for a long moment, defeat evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Can I at least say goodbye to the kids?" "They'll be back on Sunday. You can see them then per the temporary custody arrangement outlined in the filing. For now, I suggest you pack what you need and leave." As he slowly climbed the stairs to gather his belongings, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Jessica. "Has he told you yet? Just wondering how you're holding up." The smug satisfaction in those words solidified my resolve for the final phase of my plan. I didn't respond immediately, that would come later. David left an hour later, a suitcase in each hand, looking shell-shocked and considerably older than he had that morning. As his car pulled away, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The marriage I thought I had was already gone, had been for some time. Now at least the pretense was over. 3 days later, after consulting with my lawyer again, I sent Jessica a text. "I think we should meet. There are things you should know before you get any deeper with David. Coffee tomorrow at 2 p.m., the Cornerstone Cafe on 7th Street. Her reply came quickly. "I have nothing to say to you." I responded, "That's fine. You can just listen, unless you're not interested in knowing about the other women." 20 minutes passed before her next message. "What other women?" "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., I'll be there whether you come or not." I knew she would come. Women like Jessica, who pursue married men, often believe they're special, the exception rather than the rule. The idea that she might be just one in a series would be intolerable to her ego. Sure enough, at 2:05 the next day, she slid into the seat across from me at the cafe, trying to appear confident but betrayed by the nervousness in her eyes. "Make this quick," she said. "I have a meeting at 3. "Thank you for coming," I said calmly, pushing a coffee across the table that I'd already ordered for her. "Non-fat latte with vanilla, right? David mentioned it was your favorite." The small detail unsettled her, as I knew it would. "What do you want, Carolyn?" "To have a conversation, woman to woman, like you wanted on Tuesday." She shifted uncomfortably. "If this is some attempt to win him back—" "It's not," I assured her. "David and I are done. The divorce is proceeding. He's all yours." Relief flashed across her face. "Although," I continued, opening a folder I'd brought with me, "you might want to know exactly what you're getting." I slid a document across the table, a credit card statement with certain charges highlighted. The Trillium Hotel 3 months before you came into the picture with a woman named Alicia Turner. A client, I believe? Then there's this one. I produced another statement. Jewelry from Bellamy's, but not for you. That was for Stephanie in accounting. She got a nice bracelet. You only got earrings, if I recall correctly. Jessica stared at the papers, her complexion paling slightly. These could be for anyone, business dinners, gifts for his mother. "I called Alicia," I interrupted smoothly. "She was quite forthcoming once I explained the situation. Apparently David told her we were already separated and the divorce was just a formality. Sound familiar?" Jessica's hands tightened around her untouched coffee cup. "He has a pattern, Jessica. You're not the first, and despite what he's telling you about your special connection, you won't be the last. The condo? He bought a similar one 3 years ago for a woman named Rebecca. When that fell apart, he sold it quickly and at a loss. It's all documented here." I tapped the folder. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, a tremor in her voice. "If you're so done with him, why do you care who he's with?" I leaned back, considering her question. "I don't care who David is with. What I care about is the truth. You called me, remember? You wanted to gloat, to flaunt your victory." "I'm simply providing context for that victory." "I don't believe you," she said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "David loves me. We have plans." "I'm sure he says that. He's very convincing." I gathered the papers back into the folder. "Everything I've shown you is documented and verifiable. What you do with this information is entirely up to you. Stay with him, leave him. I genuinely don't care. But I believe in making informed decisions." I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. "One last thing. David isn't as financially secure as he's led you to believe. There's significant debt, hidden from me until recently, that will come to light in the divorce proceedings. And his mother, who adores me by the way, has already rewritten her will to protect the children's inheritance from his poor decision-making, as she calls it. Just thought you should know what you're actually getting." I walked out without looking back, feeling Jessica's stunned gaze following me. Whether she believed me immediately didn't matter. Doubt had been planted. The folder contained irrefutable evidence that would only confirm that doubt. David's house of cards would collapse under its own weight. Over the following weeks, the divorce proceeded with surprising smoothness. David, perhaps realizing how thoroughly outmaneuvered he was, didn't contest the terms my lawyer had proposed. Primary custody of the children remained with me, with generous visitation for him. The financial settlement was equitable, including the disclosure of the condo and other assets he had attempted to hide. 2 months after our separation, I received an unexpected text from Jessica. "You were right about everything. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Her apology meant nothing to me. This hadn't been about revenge. It had been about reclaiming my dignity and securing my children's future. As for David, I heard through mutual friends that he had been passed over for promotion, his professional reputation tarnished by the personal drama he had created. Jessica had apparently sent their text message history to several colleagues before ending things, exposing his habit of conducting personal affairs during work hours and on company devices, a clear violation of their employment policies. The condo was put on the market. David moved into a small apartment across town. When he sees the children now, there's a wariness in his interactions with me, a recognition that he had severely underestimated the woman he married. Sometimes people ask if I regret not confronting David sooner, not fighting harder to save my marriage. I don't. What I regret is not recognizing my own worth sooner, not understanding that I deserved better than what he offered. The phone call from Jessica, intended to devastate me, instead became the catalyst for my liberation. She meant it as a finishing blow to a woman she perceived as weak and defeated. Instead, it gave me the final piece of information I needed to free myself from a relationship that diminished rather than elevated me. Today, a year later, I'm thriving. My little job that David dismissed has evolved into a partnership at the firm. The children are adjusting well to our new normal. I've even begun dating again, cautiously and on my own terms. As for Jessica, I heard she left the company shortly after their breakup. David occasionally brings a new woman to school events or child exchanges, never the same one twice. Some patterns don't change. But I have changed. I'm stronger now, more confident in my boundaries, more aware of my value. I no longer confuse silence with peace or compromise with self-erasure. That phone call, intended to break me, instead remade me, and for that, ironically, I almost owe Jessica thanks. Almost, but not quite.